always the athletes. So,
All right. Wednesday, June 11th. Patrick's in Germany, getting close to the end of his time there.
less than a week.
And I'm home for less than a week. I just got to spend the first night in my bed in a while. Super nice. I might have spent a lot of time there just laying around this morning. Just sometimes it's nice to just take whatever. But we're gonna do NorCal Classic review today. Obviously, there's a ton of content out about the NorCal Classic already. I got to go there kind of last minute in a kind of unique role, which was sort of free for all, do whatever I want, talk to whomever, watch as much or little as I need to, no structured job. And so I think got to have a pretty cool experience and exposure to what that's all about. But I think, Patrick, we're going to start with something that happened after the NorCal Classic. That seemed that's the most important thing to probably begin with.
Yeah, so those who followed Alex Gazan or Jake feel like a nap. Alex posted that obviously after NorCal Classic, I think they rented some type of like vehicle that you could sleep in, kind of like a van. I don't know. I actually messaged him to see what it was because it looked pretty cool, like a camper van of some sort. And apparently they got in an accident, and pretty serious accident. They're okay, but what started off as a fun road trip quickly turned into one of the scariest experience I've ever had. Thanking God to be alive and all the ways He protected us and what could have been a fatal accident. Jake and I are both okay and out of the hospital. I have a small fracture in my fibula and a lot of swelling in my leg and glass where glass should never be. But overall, hoping for a speedy recovery and getting back to doing what I love soon. If you feel led, we have a GoFundMe in my bio to cover some of the unexpected costs from the ambulance and emergency service that looked like insurance isn't going to cover. Zero pressure. God is good, and everything is going to be okay. So, looking through the images, this is that vehicle looks like, and this is her in the hospital.
Yeah. So, two of the nicest people. Hate to see this, but did get it. We have heard from them, and what she put online is kind of the echoes what we heard from them as well. They're trying to stay super positive. Jake is he's a this is a case with a lot of athletes, and you start to hear more and more about this, but having a person like him is a huge part of Alex's success, and he's always there for her to support any ways that he can, and I'm sure he is also going to do that now. But it's just tough. I mean, she just had a great weekend over there. She's won the last two competitions she's competed at, and quite frankly, she's one of the best women on paper this season. And so now in a year where we're already missing some athletes in some competitions for different reasons, also some of them with injury in the case of Gabby, likely going to miss her from some competitions as well. So it's not the most important part of any of this. Patrick's put the GoFundMe link there if you guys want to support them.
It's also in the video description too, a link too. So.
But yeah, just obviously thoughts and prayers with them. Happy that they're okay, but pretty tough to see that happen.
Yeah, I mean, for those who are like, I've heard a little bit of rumblings about like her sending a GoFundMe, but the reason why is the other driver was uninsured, so that means they're on the hook for everything. And then those who've ever had to call an ambulance and go to an emergency room, that's usually that's a big chunk of change. So she's not trying to take advantage of you. She would never do that with her fans and the people that that she loves. So, and she didn't set it up to go fund me. I believe some Nicole Gazan, so a relative of hers. So yeah. So yeah, like Brian said, there's a link there. It's also in the description. So Jake and Alex really well. I know Alex and Jake pretty well as well, and just really good people. We don't know what this means for her season, I mean, that's not. I think that's what we don't need to concern ourselves with. That we just need her to be healthy and be thankful that she's safe.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
So anyways, because this is obviously the most important thing here, and she obviously coming off the win in NorCal in a very impressive manner, I think we're going to try to focus on the athletes as much as we can that competed there and let that kind of drive the conversation. And so I think we will start with the women's side of things. And I do want to take a second to talk about her as from the athletic standpoint as well. There were ultimately 8 opportunities to score points at this competition. She won 2 of the events. She had 4 top 5 finishes. She did have a 1 finish outside of the top 10 on the running after the row. But pretty much as expected, I would say, from her against this field. She looked like she should be the best one on paper. And she was. She went up to the top pretty quickly, stayed there, and ended up pulling away by close to 20 points against her closest competitors. And in terms of like the sports drama for the week, there was little drama surrounding Alex at the competition. By the final day, it was kind of just, it was kind of just, let me find this. Just take care of business. The final workout, especially, they had legless rope climbs and increasing weight cleans. All of the talk in the back with the women was that because they had the same volume of legless rope climbs as the men, they had to change their own weights. Additionally, that it was going to be a tight time cap. And it's pretty wild. Like this, I actually loved the final, the legless rope climb and the increasing weight squat clean demands strength in 2, very different capacities that I think are both, things that you should absolutely have under your belt, especially if you're going to qualify to the games. And so a 7-minute time cap, she finishes with 90 seconds to spare, and nobody else in the field managed to clear the last barbell. I'm not even sure if anyone had a chance to really try it. I think maybe even some of the athletes in the first heat. Look, there was, is this really how? That's interesting. I was just looking at the results. So all the way down to Lindsay Lane, who's listed in 12th in this workout, they all got to the last bar but never lifted it. So from 2nd through 12th. So I guess that's 13 people. But there's 3 of them, Kristen, Uda, and Lindsay, who have no tie break time listed. So they ended up tied on 12th, where there were a bunch of other women that got 2nd through 11th and had a tie break time listed. And I know for a fact, I'm looking at this, Ariel Sanders tie break time of 6:59, which is when she cleared the last box. And Kristen, Uda, and Lindsay all would have definitely had a faster time than that. So that's just another thing that's not great when you look back at this from the execution standpoint of the competition overall, because obviously Kristen and Uda ended up in the top 5. I think Lindsay actually had a pretty good tiebreak time on this, and the tiebreak times, like Elizabeth Withard's 6:43, 6:48, 6:49, and all the way down, her tiebreak was 6:30. It didn't enter it. Yeah, I was going to say she got there pretty early. So this actually would have been a finish of 4th place for her, which would have affected even Carolyn Prevost, who was, on the verge of potentially making the games. She loaded her weight after the last box jump over. Thanks, JR. Yeah, and they didn't actually specify when you had to load the weight either. So if you really understood the workout, then you would do the box jumps and then load your weight. Most of you will have probably seen this in detail between Spencer and Nate, where Nate came back and then loaded his weight, and we'll get to the men later on, whereas Spencer came back to a preloaded bar. And, therefore Spencer was probably not doing the best thing if he was playing for the tiebreaker. And Nate was, but at the end of the day, they both finished. So it's a different situation, but yeah, it is confusing. And it's, I would say that in general, this is a good example of the overarching issue with the weekend, is that and this is something that Patrick and I talk about a lot. You have to consider the pro field differently than the rest of the divisions. And it's okay to have an idea in your mind that you want to treat everyone equally. It is very good to have an idea in your mind that you want everyone to have a good experience, but it is just not the case that they are equal athletes that are pursuing this as a career in the pro and the elite fields where there's prize money, qualifying spots, sponsor deals, and all this other stuff on the line, they are different than the rest of the divisions. And if you don't like that, then you're just going to have to get used to it, because that's how it is. They've invested their life in it. Their financial earnings are tied to it. And what we saw this weekend was probably the most obvious example of a competition at a stage that has this big of a spotlight on it, that was not able to really deliver on that front multiple times throughout the weekend. And, Scott Schweitzer said it, I think, fairly well. I saw the clip on Instagram, those clips from his show, I think on Monday night. They did it on Monday, Patrick?
Mm-hmm. Sunday night show.
Oh, they did. Okay. And anyway, so the final workout, I think all of that is to say that the final workout really showcased a big difference between Alex and the rest of the women here. They, I guess, obviously it's just fractured fibula, minor fracture. Like, it feels likely that she won't be able to compete at the games with that. I don't, probably maybe not WFP either. I'm not sure, but for the games specifically, that would, I guess they might go to a backfill in that situation. And kind of, the next group of women here, Hattie Canio, Carolyn Prevost, Kristen Holta, like, they were all really close throughout the entire weekend. And this was where the exciting kind of battle was for that second game spot on the women's field.
Yeah, I mean, if they do backfill, you'd imagine they backfill from this competition, and it'd be Caroline Prevost.
Yeah, and I think because of what happened in the men's field, that there was very little conversation about the women's field. I think, and I can't even necessarily, I don't disagree with this, but I think, what Sevan said is a storyteller's dream, because it was so much drama wrapped up in the men's final for tons of different reasons. But it kind of reminded me of I remember the show that Bill and Chase did years ago that was like the best workout ever at the CrossFit Games. Yeah. And push pull was like kind of constantly being pushed up to the top of that conversation, because that epic battle between Stoneberg and then Bridges and Froning was so good. But they just like completely forgot about the women did the workout. And then, and then there was like the other side of that, which was, I think, the Fibonacci finale, which had this epic battle between Katrin, Annie, and Sarah, and then also between Cara and Tia. And on the men's side, like, the biggest storyline was that no one finished it, and Fraser got to smile and enjoy a walk-off win, whatever.
Someone did finish it, though.
Yeah, down in Texas, bald guy with beard from the second heat out of 4. I'm drawing a blank on his name right now.
Collins.
Yes.
And that brings up that's a good example of, like, that's a great accomplishment for someone like Logan Collins, but no one talks about it.
It gets overshadowed. Similar to the what's it called, Redemption, where the guy who used to train with Jacob Hepner, Zach, something, 2016 final. But anyway, we're getting off track. The point is, the women's field was also super competitive for that second spot, and it was definitely not without controversy. There were, when you're talking about 1.5 points, which should have been at least 2.5 points if Lindsay Lane's tiebreak at the very least would have been entered in. But either way, there was a lot of small margins in this competition that obviously ended up eventually affecting it. And, one of the things that I saw, I think it was Alexis Dutois that posted it, was like a super obvious no rep from Hattie Canio on the legless rope climb, where she tried to reach for it and missed, clamped the rope, stayed up there, tapped it again, and came down. And in Hiller's third day video, he had an interview with Blair Morrison that talked about the leg clamp, because there was some miscommunication on the day about whether clamping the legs early before touching was allowed or not. How I understood what Blair said is that is allowed in all of the division that had legless rope climbs, except for the pro division. And in the pro division, it would not be allowed. So as it should not be allowed. Well, really, it just shouldn't be allowed. If you're concerned about the safety of the athletes on the movement there or their capacity to do it, don't program it. Just program rope climbs. It's a super valid test for almost anyone anyway, just to climb a rope. But if you're going to have it, a legless rope climb, then it's legless all the way to the top. And this is the main thing that I would say about competitions or competition organizers overall. When you're writing the standards for workouts, stop thinking about anything other than what is the most likely outcome for the judges to apply equally the standard to the field. The other super obvious example from this weekend was the snatch standard. Heavy Isabel, we've seen over and over and over at the semifinal. And I'm sorry, but these are all semifinals. They're all part of the CrossFit Games season. Whatever the standard was for the online semifinal should have been communicated to the competitions, including Mayhem that happened before from CrossFit. Here are the standards for Heavy Isabel, and everyone should be using them at every competition exactly the same. Putting in this standard where the feet have to come inside the shoulders in order to lock it out, it set up the judges for failure, which is the last thing that a competition should want to do. And some athletes got away with this. Nate Ackerman did starfish snatches the entire time, which he always does, and his judge didn't call it. And there were other athletes, and I saw some specifically like Drake Lewis and Nikita Yundov, who would have done way better on this workout if they had Nate Ackerman's judge. And I should never be saying that an athlete would have done better if they had someone's judge. They should be doing better because they're better at the workout or fitter. But to me, it's not on the judge and it's not on the athlete. That's on the competition organizers. And in this case, because of that, in that particular workout, I would trace it all the way back to CrossFit of saying, hey, we're going to do this workout. Anyone who's doing it at their competition, here's the standards. This is like the year that they changed the burpee standards 3 times in the same competitive season. It's like, what? So that's what I would suggest for competition organizers. Write standards that set your judges up for success.
Yeah, Alex pretty much ran away from it, like you implied, and then again, it was a really tight between Hattie and Caroline and Holta there, and it was just there was a lot, just and I don't want to harp on it. It beat Blair and organize and Ben down. They're obviously going to learn from this, and they'll get better because of it. But there's. It seemed like I think that when that's compounding the issues where rule changes and incidents like this, then again, it takes away from what you were trying to accomplish at the beginning is, find 2 athletes to send to the games. And, there's less to do about that and more people still talking about that. And it's unfortunate. And hopefully it's a lesson learned. And, everyone's saying, well, this is what NorCal Classic is. And, yeah, I mean, again, I don't want to point fingers.
Let's pause there for a second.
Yeah.
Because I'd never gone to NorCal Classic.
Yes.
I see it from afar, and I have my perspective, which is this is a throwback OG community style, kind of outside of the realm of thinking, which is very much how Ben and Blair are in general. Like this is a competition that is a true expression of who they are as people, leaders in their community, CrossFitters, and thinkers. I think that's amazing. I love that. I like competitions that reflect either the location or the organizer, whatever. That's cool. I've also viewed it as a competition that somehow has managed to find a significant prize purse, at least for the first place winner year after year. They're offering $20,000, $25,000, $30,000 if you're able to win it to both the male and female champion. There's very few competitions, like 5 or less per year, that usually have a prize purse that's that big. For a first place winner. So, and they're working with the city and they're working with the police department there. And it's like, these are things that I thought about for their competitions in the past. I never really had that much of a vested interest in, do they write good workout standards? Do they have safe floor layouts? Do they have these things? Because I haven't gone there. I haven't had a very close relationship with many athletes who've been participating there. And it hasn't been an important element of the competition. It's in Northern California. People were giving me a hard time because, hey, you said you never go to a competition that Dave was going to be at, and Dave always goes to NorCal Classic. Dave always goes to NorCal Classic. Dave knows Ben and Blair for 15 years. Dave knows what this competition is. and he allowed it to be a qualifying event to the games. So if you want to say that this should never have been a qualifying event to the games in hindsight, that's one thing. But who actually knew what this competition was like ahead of time? It's the same conversation that I had about him last year at the games. He knows all the variables and makes the decision anyway. And I know people are sick of hearing me say it, but that's like, for me, if you want to point fingers at anyone for anything this weekend, that's the only place it needs to go.
Yeah, I think I was expecting that, but the thing is, do we know it is Dave that's actually making the decision? We've known in the past it has been, but I just don't know. I just don't think, because even Dave said it. It's like it is. NorCal is what it is, and I don't necessarily agree. Blah blah. Well, I don't know. That just doesn't sound like.
What's his title on paper? It's director of sport.
I get it. Director of sport, but it does. There's such thing as paper. And I'm not defending anyone. I'm just saying that I just find it hard to believe that Dave would just because he's like counter. If you watch the weekend review, he goes, he just seemed like he didn't really want that to be a qualifying event. And granted, I know
So
that
is he just completely powerless in his role at this point? Is he no better than the president of the U.S. when Biden was there? Just sitting there as a figurehead, but he has no, he's just being told what to do. That doesn't seem like how Dave is.
I know it doesn't seem like that at all, but I don't know. We can go into down this rabbit hole and conspiracy theories and everything, but I mean, I don't know. I don't know. It just, for me, it seems odd. It seems odd. I know, CrossFit has lost some money last couple of years when they've ran semifinals. So giving it back, and these semifinals have to pay.
I mean, look, they've been losing money on the sport. They've been losing money as a sport for a long time.
I'm just saying, this was one of those. This event was a last minute event, and I think the reason why it was a last minute event is like they threw money at CrossFit. It's like, we want to be an event, and CrossFit.
Okay, but if that's the case, then if I'm Dave, I can say, okay, but I know how your workouts have been in the past. For the pro division that's qualifying to the games, to my competition, you're going to need to send me those floor plans, the workouts, the movement standards, the descriptions, and we're going to have someone help you out to make sure that we don't have the issues that you guys have had in the past. That's a very come on.
I know, but maybe it's just one of those. Again, if you do it for them, you have to do it for everybody else too. And I think that kind of takes away from the point of them not being involved in their competitions. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, we don't know. We can only presume. But again,
let's talk about a couple other women here.
We're talking about other things outside the athletes. Let's go back to the athletes.
Hattie Canio and Caroline Prevost, both incredible weekends. Both some stuff to overcome. Ended up coming down to super small margin. I told Patrick this after the competition, even though these margins were super small, both of the athletes that on paper got the qualifying spots to the games and the athlete that just missed out are all good candidates to go to the CrossFit Games. The test overall was good. It filtered the best towards the top. We know that the margins are small in this sport for this caliber of athletes. Regardless of anything else, Hattie got the job done. Congratulations to her and Tristan on making it back to the games. And honestly, for Caroline Prevost, this was a great weekend. She's already qualified to the Masters Games. And if you listened, I think Andrew had it in one of his weekend reviews, but she also told me this when I spoke to her. Kristen Holte was one of her idols. It was one of these athletes, even though she's only a couple years older than her, that had success prior to her, that she was looking up to and trying to chase. And it meant a lot to Caroline to be able. It's so funny how athletes' perspectives are different, right? It was cool for Caroline to be able to beat one of her idols from years back. Even though Kristen was coming out there with a totally different mindset, I actually think that Kristen's approach to this competition is we're starting to see more and more athletes that are able to find this approach one way or another, which is not careless, but a little bit carefree. I can just go compete. I'm not so worried about the results or the outcome. I love doing this. And we see no real surprises here for me from Kristen. The snatch and the clean were obviously both going to be the heavier implements on the weekend. super appropriate to test those. Probably the thing that she's least concerned about is her top end strength overall. So she takes a couple hits on those. Very impressive and consistent the rest of the way. And just, as we've been saying, you can just add the list, like the list of women who are over 35 and under 20 that are impressing in this sport is continuing to expand. It's crazy to me, but it's just how it is.
But you know what I see? I mean, we talked about this in the previous shows. Like, you look at her, you look at the Krieger athletes, even if you look at the leaderboard from like basically, I mean, the top 10, fitness prevailed. These are all, they're not specialists. None of these women you would consider a specialist outside of Alex and her freaking ridiculous rope climbs. But I mean, but they're just fit, overall fitness. So I will applaud the effort in the programming where I think the fittest people did prevail, even on the men's side. You didn't see any specialists. You didn't see any like aberrations to the leaderboard where, what is that guy's name or that woman doing there? And what this does, it sets Kristen up for she has to be a favorite going into the last chance qualifier, an online competition. She has to be one of the favorites.
Maybe if there's a max lift, a 4-rep max, a 3-rep max, whatever, no. But if it's just fitness, yes, she can be in the mix for sure. We saw it in the Open. We saw it with all the Metcons this weekend. And it's just cool. The other cool thing is that right behind her are 2 other Krieger women, Uda Lundkevam, who's continuing to string together good performances, top 10 in Dubai, top 15 at WFP, top 5 here at NorCal Classic. We had said it when we were kind of previewing this, that John Young didn't have her in the top 10, and he's not going to be able to avoid doing that going forward. No one really should. She's put herself out there on 3 different competition stages, CrossFit Games semifinal, big offseason competition and international lineup of athletes, and at the WFP, which is up to this point the strongest field 1 through 30 that anyone's competed against this year, and she did well at all of them. She does have a couple known holes in the gymnastics realm, but she's really strong. She's got capacity. She's got upper body pulling is pretty good. So yeah, Uda Lundkevam, another good performance.
Yeah,
and Andrea.
I think what people miss on that final event, because everyone's eyes were on Kristen, Caroline, and Hattie, was that Oda also was at the barbell as well. And that barbell would have been the weight on that barbell would have been no problem. It was basically, I think she got kind of hung up on the like, again, you talked about the gymnastics and the upper body pulling. We know like ring muscle ups and the legless row climbs were going to be an issue, but like she could have easily put herself in that place if she, cleaned up a little bit small at some of those gymnastics. And like I said, we said before, when it comes to the Norwegians, she'll have no problem with barbells.
Yeah, I talked about it a little bit while you were gone with that last workout not being great for the women. 2 extra minutes, you end up getting a better representation of what it was supposed to test for if you want to keep the volume of legless rope climbs the same. Yeah, and then Andrea, I mean, obviously, I still think Andrea's best performances have been last 2 years in Dubai, 2nd and 4th place, but expected her to be in the top 10 somewhere if she was healthy. She looked healthier than when we saw her compete at WFP, whether that's physical, mental, or whatever. And I think overall, the decision to come early for the Norwegians really paid off here. Three finishes inside the top 6. And then, we talk about it a lot. When you travel, it complicates things. Well, they did this travel and they still were able to perform really well, represent their coaches and their training program and themselves. So great weekend for the Krieger ladies.
I think what it also shows is, Kristen, before she started doing Krieger, who was she a part of? What athlete, what camp was she a part of? Oh, did I just stump you?
I don't actually know.
She was an Invictus athlete.
Oh, yeah.
So she would actually travel. She actually lived in San Diego. She'd travel out there. So you have someone, again, her expertise, bringing 2 athletes who've never, done that trip and kind of just like guide them. I mean, what she's doing as a coach athlete is what I envision. Like, can you imagine when Tia does that as well? Just like the information. But I think Kristen right now is kind of like the prototype where she's an active coach, but she's not doing it because she wants the glory. She's doing it to show her athletes how to properly do things. And I think it's working.
We had talked about how a lot of the variables could line up really well for Trista Smith this weekend. She ended up having a solid finish. And I think that Trista's in a spot in her career where like these kinds of competitions are really good for her. Go out like the out of the norm. Even like, here's the thing. Although there were a ton of variables changing during the weekend and it was, frustrating at times and whatever, this is not like, if I'm an athlete or a coach, I'm looking at this as a gift. Like, this is an opportunity for us to deal with changes, late changes, adversity, unknown situations, outdoor events, heat, all this, the variables that come with NorCal Classic that you don't often get to experience. And even if you won't necessarily get to experience them again, just to know that you've gone through that, the next time that something pops up that's a late change for whatever reason, the coach can say to the athlete, hey, we got through NorCal 25. We're good on this. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
This is
Like
nothing.
a badge of honor.
Yeah, you can like, so that's what I would say is like, and for Trista, we've been talking about it, more competition experience for her against more athletes in different environments. This is all a good thing. She looked like she was competing fun, competing happy, competing healthy. So 7th place. And I think a lot of wins for Trista this weekend.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, she's only 19, and she's gaining a lot of competition experience since we saw her on the big stage at West Coast Classic. And she still has online stuff. She still has the LCQ, and she also still has online qualifier for WFP and WFP as well. I mean, that's the cool thing about like a lot of these athletes that we're going to go through, because there's only one spot in LCQ. What are they going to do after that? There's other options, but we'll talk about that another time. But yeah, I mean, just looking down this list, it's like a who's who, just like we said before about some of these names, and so that way we're not. I mean, I know you want to talk about Maddie. I'll let you go ahead and talk about Maddie Fouts.
Yeah, I'll say Maddie and Carissa Stapp Maddie Fouts, Carissa Stapp are probably the two most unexpected names in the top 10 here. Probably most people would have expected Sydney Wells, Elizabeth Wishart, Miley Wade, Rebecca Fusile ahead of girls like this. Maddie we knew about, and she was kind of like my dark horse on the women's side to keep an eye on. Did get an interview with her over there. Hopefully she's registering on some people's radar now. By far the biggest competition that she's done, and she's quite motivated by this. She's also pursuing a doctorate degree, I believe, in physical therapy. So she's one of these athletes that has a good balance between in and out of the gym that's working for her. And Carissa Stapp, I would say, was a surprise of the weekend on the women's side. I got a chance to talk to her. I've never really spoken to her before. I met her once when she was on CrossFit I Love It's Games team with Carrie and Mitch. But I think I just said hi. She's I talked to her after the Farmnastics event. She was running with the kettlebells, like legitimately running with the kettlebells. And she's a super kind, nice person, but doesn't do a ton of competitions that I know of. But she had a great performance here, and definitely just did want to mention both of them.
Yeah, I mean, we know Carissa, like she's one of those endurance athletes. She does really good in running workouts. Um, yeah. So and obviously those were her best 2 events, the row and the run. Two top 5s out of that. And Maddie, again, I think this is what, like 4 live competitions she's done, and has finished in the top 10 in all of them. So
it's not the same as Austin Hatfield, but it's the same in the sense of she has very little live competition experience and she's doing pretty good.
Yeah. And then kind of going down the list, I'm just gonna, so we're not going through all of them. I mean, Nina, a 10th place finish, kind of where we expected. Rebecca Foussier kind of had, I believe she stepped on the rope and twisted her ankle really bad. If you've seen it, they put it out there. Elizabeth Wishart, I mean, she looked good at times during the event. Sydney just looked. It wasn't obviously some of those events that played to her strengths, but she had just looked tired, and it had been a long season for Sydney as well. And then Miley Wade, the youngster, she did really good, obviously, in the cardio events, and then kind of going down, and then down at, what's surprising when you look at Emily Rolfe, takes
two zeros and still beats half the field.
Yeah. Yeah, 2
Which
zeros.
It's not zeros, it's like 40 something points,
yeah,
right? So she had, let's see. So she gets 82 points on those 2 workouts combined. And what was her total points? 130. So she only got about 50 on the other 2, on the other 7. So it's average of 7 per placement. And so if that would put her at 67 points if she had just average finishes on those. Caroline was in 3rd with 66. So we can project just like John and I had both said in the previews, healthy Emily Rolfe is in the top 5 of this field. Her competition performances show that. Obviously, either not healthy enough or not wanting to risk anything to do those 2 events. It was heavy snatching and legless rope climbs, I would presume, to be the things that were concerning. And so, yeah, interesting that she showed up and competed anyway, but fitness is totally there. And obviously, if you can't do something, you get penalized for it for whatever
Any
reason.
any athletes between Nina and Ariel Saunders you want to highlight?
I'll give a shout out to Ariel. Actually, she came up and she actually put a camera in my face and asked me why I ranked her so low. And she
What'd she
did,
get on the row?
and she did
Oh,
do better, better than I had it marked down as. So I think nice competition for Ariel. She's really motivated. She's continuing to put herself in situations like this to, get competition experience. I think from just briefly talking to her, it feels like she has a really good understanding of where she's at compared to where she wants to be. And I actually wouldn't be that surprised if we don't see her do many other competitions this year, if she just kind of dives into the preparation mode to try to maybe improve on those things.
yeah. Between Emily Rolfe and Emily White, any athletes there you want to kind of spotlight? I mean, you already talked about Emily Rolfe.
Ali Zerka, I actually saw her in Colton at the airport and got a chance to talk to them for a bit. And it was my first time to see her compete live in this, in the kind of recent times. And I was impressed. She's got some skills. She's got some strength. I mean, the skills is where she would say she's lacking. And I think that shows on farm gymnastics is just a pirouette workout. Pump house is probably coming down to the pullovers. But yeah, capacity and strength are very good for her. And it was fun to watch her compete. So, I know that it didn't go the way that Colton had. She kind of only came because Colton was coming. And she's like, it's kind of silly to be at a competition just on my own competing, but I was glad she was there and it was fun to watch her.
Yeah. Anyone else?
I don't know. Hinatea Montebello. I actually did an interview with her partner, Gonzalo Del Rio. They're living in French Polynesia, which I think is where she's from. He's Spanish. And it was cool talking to them a little bit to get their perspective on doing an event like this and what their future plans are. I hadn't really known of them previously. I think she's got such a unique name. I think I've seen it on a leaderboard, but didn't know too much about her. So I just love that athletes like this are taking the chances to do the competitions this year that they may not usually have to do on other seasons. So a little shout out to them.
Shout out to the Vegas girls, Allison Scudds and Kendall Gilmore. Kendall obviously is graduated from the teen division, 18 years old now. Allison Scudds, she's a veteran. A lot of people, it's funny how a lot of people just bag on her, but I think she's doing what she does. And as long as she's enjoying it and she's seeing improvements, that's great, and I'm happy for her.
Well, we've only got about 22 minutes until Patrick's got to go be a guest star on a game show.
Right. So we'll switch over to the men's side.
So we'll flip to the men, and yeah, let's do the same here. Let's start at the top. I mean, Bill Leahy, and there's really not enough good things to say about Bill. We had tons of good stuff to say about him last year before semifinals. This is actually, I think, even more poetic than having done it at West Coast Classic, basically exactly on the year of when he tore his Achilles. And he looked great. And I spoke to him in the run up to the competition, and he basically said what I had assumed, which is mentally doing TFX was important for me to trust the body again. And it certainly looked like he trusted himself every workout, pretty much on par with what you would expect from him, taking advantage of the strengths that we know that he has, and then managing the stuff that he's not as good at. When we get to the row and the running there, usually the long stuff hurts him. 8th and 8th. And I would say like a longer machine is probably like the best case thing for him.
Yeah.
And so now I'm kind of wondering, because I think you reposted something about this on B.Friendly Fitness today or yesterday. And I was talking about running when I was talking about Tia Claire, Toomey, and Ricky, and Jay, and Maddie, and that I want to reincorporate it into my training. But really what I've been thinking more and more is athletes who want to be great at this sport, you got to run and then do other stuff. whatever the other stuff is. That's what you need to be really good at. Yes, sometimes we get these one-off 2K row, 2 mile run, whatever workouts, but Bill's kind of showing me here that maybe he can run kind of well, but if you put running with X or XY, fill in some other movements, maybe that's the issue. So
Yeah,
that might be an area that he could key in on this summer.
yeah, I agree because I think what it is kind of just like that power bank. Like, especially if it's something he's good at, like bar cycling versus a run, he's going to put a little bit more emphasis on the bar cycling because he's better at it, and versus the run when we know most of those workouts when it's like running and lifting, it comes down to the run. So I mean, he's figuring it out, and I think like you said, TFX was kind of like on paper, kind of just like him figuring things out, especially coming off an injury less than a year ago, and then coming here exactly a year, and then just executing, knowing what he's capable of doing. And I think he was really good. I think he showed he belonged. He showed what we saw a couple of years ago in him, and I'm interested to see how he does. Like again, confidence plays a lot, especially for rookies, and it'll be interesting to see how he does in the games.
Yeah, and I think I'm actually started looking at the games field, and I've got some cool stuff coming up for that later, but that's for another time. I think the story of the weekend ended up being this thing between Jorge and Nate, and I wanted to put an idea out there because everything happened, and at the end of the day, they're exactly tied on points. And I've always had this kind of like frustration with the tiebreaker, and in this case, I think how it was presented was the tiebreaker is the truck push because Jorge won that, and he actually got less points for winning that than anyone would have got for winning anything else. But actually, if you just look at it, it was a first, and Nate didn't have a first. The normal tiebreaker goes to the highest placement that you had. And that would be Jorge on this truck push. So that's kind of normal. I don't know if that's what their thought process was, but that's normal. What I really was thinking is if you got two people tied, especially if it's for a podium spot, big money, or a games ticket or whatever, what I would like the tiebreaker to be is head to head. Pull out everyone else, look at their results on paper, and say how many times did athlete A beat athlete B and athlete B beat athlete A. And I like this tiebreaker, especially if there's an odd number of scoring opportunities.
Yeah.
In this competition, there were an even number of scoring opportunities, and it was 4-4, so it wouldn't have worked. But 7 or 9 events, you can't have that situation. You think back to Rogue last year, like weird. What if Tia wins 4 events, Laura wins 4, Tia gets second 4, Laura gets second 4, and there's no tie break. But if you have a 9th event, you guarantee that there's, and there was in that case, and it didn't work out that way. But you get the idea.
Yeah.
In terms of this, so I like that odd number tie break head to head. How many times did you beat you or the other person? I don't know. An idea for people who run competition.
I mean, that's what they do in golf. I mean, they don't grab like your best scorer hole. They go to either go to, they just keep on playing holes, or they do like the best score out of 3 holes. It all depends, but it's basically head to head, and it's just not between 2 people. It could be multiple people. So, and I don't know, you earn it that way, and you get to see, someone earn it that way or someone falter. It's like it creates more storytelling because, like again, despite what happened, let's say what did happen, what happened, and they did tie. You're like, okay, we're gonna settle this once and for all. You two are going head to head in this workout, and then then that's it. You bring your best, you get one shot. So,
Patrick, a lot of love for Jorge in the comments, and I want to do this before we talk about him and Nate and whatever. You've known Jorge for many years. We've known him and talked to him and followed his career, especially over the last 2 seasons that he's been trying to pursue, transitioning from the team champion that he was to making it as an individual to the CrossFit Games. And regardless of anything else, he's done that. As someone who's been following these last 2 years, what is what would you say about the work, the commitment of the pursuit, and then now qualifying for Jorge?
I'm happy for him. Like I said, I've known him for really since 2022, and we saw him when he made that trip to Mayhem during the 2023 season. He still wasn't sure if he was going to do team or not. He went to Mayhem. He just fell in love, fit in perfectly there. We both talked about it. We were there when he was there, and It was supposed to be a week-long trip, and they were supposed to go to Nashville and check out Proven. They were just checking out training camps, and they end up staying like 2 more additional weeks. And you know, he gets a lot of grief from some people saying he's a team athlete, and the team athletes aren't really games athletes or whatnot. And he hasn't really had that like step in moment, but we've seen him, and he's proven it on road. When the biggest, he's proven it as a team, as a member of a team at games, and he's proven it at the biggest stages like road that he can compete with these athletes. He just needs to get to that point. And this was that. I think this was that time where, you know, he is competing with some. I mean, yeah, it didn't have the names that you normally would see. There's no Donald Peppers, Jason Hoppus, blah, blah, blah. You see, we knew from this men's field there was going to be an athlete, at least one, maybe two athletes that were going to be rookies. And Jorge probably had the best credentials out of all of them outside of Spencer Panchek. But Jorge was trending the right way. He'd been putting in the work, and I'm just extremely proud of him, and I know he is too. We both had discussions with him since then, and I know he feels bad about how he got it. But at the end of the day, him and Nate are both strong, very strong in their religion and their beliefs. And if that's the case, then then what happened was supposed to happen, and then you just can't take it for granted and do the best you can and prove that you belong there. And I think that's what I told Jorge. It's like, okay, now you put in the harder work and you prove that it wasn't a fluke. Go to the games and show off.
And he's a rookie at the games, but he's not a rookie in terms of competing against those athletes because of his experience at Rogue. And overall, for the men qualifying to the games, it was a great day for Adidas, Lab Management, and Jesus Christ. Okay.
Yes. Hallelujah.
We can't skip past what did happen here with Jorge and Nate. And I looked into this a little bit more closely just to put into context, because I say this all the time, and it's so important. If you're running a competition for the top athletes in the sport, it does come down to it, not just seconds, tenths of seconds, 1 pound, one no rep, one bad call. And so I'm going to emphasize what I said again. Program competitions, floor layouts, standards that set the judges up for success so that you can accurately assess fitness. I got to the competition a little late because of travel, and there was a controversy in the first workout, and it was between whether Trayvon or Nate had finished the workout first. On paper, Trayvon had beat him by 1.34 seconds. I had multiple people ask me if they saw or if there was video footage of it. I don't think there was. I do want to say one thing about the live stream broadcast situation in general. Again, those guys were not set up for success here. I did speed tests around the venue. The outdoor field is the second worst speed test that I've ever seen at any competition that I've live streamed. And the one with the rig it was so bad that we couldn't have done it. I could not have live streamed from there either. And immediately Rodri said, you need to get a Starlink for that spot, which is, I think, what they ended up doing. I think that the solution that they had to do the post-production was brilliant. And I just want to give a shout out to Matt Souza. When he called Sevan 4 or 5 years ago, he told Sevan, do this because it's only something that you can do, and I'll do everything that you don't want to do. And he has been true to his word and a man of that statement all the way through in domains that I think he never expected. He's taken on a lot these last 2 weeks to make those things happen. I know that the presentation and the language and everything else is controversial, but the work behind the scenes is not something that can be drawn into question. And big credit to Souza, because I know he's a huge, huge part of that. And that was the best solution, I think, given that. So there was no footage of that first event that was good enough to review that, but I heard that it might have been a closer finish than it showed up on paper. In the in the second event, the snatching, that went in Nate's favor. He was allowed to snatch in a way that was outside of the standards. He finished 3.29 seconds behind Jorge, and they were 23 lanes of each other on the competition floor. So I couldn't really see anything. They were looking down the floor at each other, but again, just a small margin I wanted to highlight. I saw someone asking about the truck thing. Yes, there were 2 different lanes on the truck, but they did happen to push in the same lane. If they had not, I don't think that they would have been able to use that as a tiebreaker, and that would have been a different conversation. If you go to the pirouette workout, Nate ended up finishing 5th and Jorge finished 3rd. I didn't see it, and I don't know if there's any footage of it, but Nate told me that he got 1 no rep on the last pirouette, and that would have cost him getting second in that workout. No one was beating Bill on that, but he would have got 3 more places there if not for that no rep. I don't know if it was a good call or not. On the rowing, he was 0.6 seconds behind Bill and 0.7 seconds behind Matt Brady. And that's, and someone was saying the men were rowing like a 135 pace.
Yeah.
Now, and then he finished 0.2 seconds behind Jackson Miller. And these are on workouts where, again, there was, quite frankly, for the standard of this competition and what it was qualifying for, just the most ridiculous starting scenario that I've ever seen. And Blair basically said, hey, we couldn't have them cross the line because they would have tripped the sensor. That's not how it works. You can actually turn the sensor on and off whenever you want it to be on and off. You also can lay it wherever you want it to be laid. So there were other ways to mitigate the chaos that happened at the start of that workout that didn't need to happen. And the transitioning to the rower affects the final time or the second time, double twos. It doesn't affect the first time, but like those 0.2 seconds between him and Jackson Miller, who knows where those were won or lost or whatever was gained. But the point is, the margins are so small, which is why you see other competition organizers spend crazy amount of times analyzing and evaluating the floor layout, the flow of athletes, making sure everyone's covering the same distance, has the same opportunity to do that without being impeded by anything or anyone else. And that was just missing from what is otherwise a very valid, like 2-part monostructural test. And then, of course, there's the final, which I counted many times watching it over. And I don't think that there's any way to say that the amount of time from when Nate would have picked up the barbell until he did pick up the barbell was somewhere between 10 and 15 seconds. And I also think that if he had the time to, like, if he wasn't so flustered, the clean might not have looked as bad as it was. That was him standing up that weight. Dude, him standing that weight up, I was right in front of him. I mean, it was insane. One of like these superhuman things that you see. Like he just went into a completely alter ego mode and said there's no chance. Like none of us are ever lifting in that way that he did. No. But
Hiller's screenshot and picture of that, where his elbows are like past his calves.
Yeah.
He's so deep in that bucket. I don't know, that deflection on his wrist is unbelievable. But
mobility and strength at the end range of motion, second to none for Nate Ackerman. Unreal. And helps being young. But either way, all of these things had to go wrong by a small margin in order for him to not qualify to the games. It was hard. And I know him and his mom really well. Oh man. So that was just tough. But I wanted to just put the whole thing into context, basically to go back to the main point, which is you got to be really intentional with how you design these workouts, the flows, the standards for the pros, because this stuff happens all the time. The last thing that I want to say about this, and I don't actually know if this is the case or not, is I don't blame Taylor for this in any way. Taylor, I know what it's like to work your ass off for an entire week or weekend and then have someone pick out one thing that you said, misinterpret it, and represent that you're just a bad person. Taylor's worked his ass off these last 2 weeks. I don't agree with everything he says. I don't agree with the way that he articulates things, but it's hard to do what he's done the last 2 weeks. It's physically demanding. It requires a lot of thought, planning, preparation, whatever. And he feels bad about that. I was standing the whole time where they were talking afterwards and all this stuff. And so for anything else, all the other variables I've talked about, I don't see Taylor at fault in this in any way.
No, I don't blame him either. It just it's one of those things. Like I posted it on Hiller's video. It's like, he didn't do it intentionally. He's owned up to it. It is what it is. Taylor's the type of person, like you said, he's the first one. It's like, I'm not a cameraman. He's not using it as an excuse. He's just stating the fact. And at the end of the day, he'll learn from it. I mean, that's just what good coaches do and good athletes do. So it's like, he feels bad. Maybe in his mind, he feels like he cost Nate, but I don't think Nate is looking at it that way. And if Nate's not looking at it that way, then he shouldn't be looking at it that way. So at the end of the day, there were some things messed up with that. But there's nothing you can do. All you can do is compete. And again, at the end of the day, it falls down to the athlete. It falls down to the competitions director. I do not blame the judge whatsoever, and I don't blame Taylor. So.
And for Nate, I told this to both him and his mom before I left the venue that day. when unfortunate circumstances befall you in life or a competition or whatever early on, uh, like there's nothing, like he's not injured, he's not hurt, he's not whatever. This is an opportunity to learn a lot of lessons at a young age. And he's got a great coach. Actually, Dom coached both Jorge and Nate. That's another guy we should probably mention. Like, what a tough situation to be in. Dom invests in his athletes as much as any coach. I know that like Kotler gets a lot of the like aggressive whatever, but maybe you guys saw the video of Dom running on the trail with Nate, pushing him along. He goes to like extreme lengths for his athletes, and it was really tough for him to watch them both. He knew the day before that they were in a battle for this. He didn't know it would end up being this scenario, but credit to Dom. Two guys who are right on the cusp of being, considered amongst the elite men on earth right now, and he's coaching both of them at pretty different stages of their career too. I know you got to go in a couple minutes, so I'm going to do a really quick flyover of the rest of the top 10 here. Spencer Panchik, for me, picked up where he left off last week. He's basically said it. John Young reignited a fire in him, and it's great to see him looking like this again. Matt Brady was my kind of Matty Fouts of the men's side, and I think I picked him 6th, take Colton out of occasion. That would have been 5th. Well, there he is in 5th. I didn't know that he could do that with this high skills that were in this field, but he's managed those really well. And he still ended up with a great finish. So it's, the hard work that he's put in this offseason has paid off. Max Krieg, I actually want to give a shout out to Holly Henderson, his coach. I didn't realize Holly was coaching him. She's qualified for the games as a master's athlete for the 2nd year in a row. Got a chance to talk to both of them. And I mean, Max, another good performance for him. Slow start, good resiliency over the weekend to climb back up. We spoke about Nicolas Bedon and got to see a full breadth of competition here. He had one kind of event where he got injured in wildland and a top 10 finish. I mean, I think this guy is legit. I don't think that the open results are a fluky. He's strong. He's got skills. He's gaining experience. He's going to continue to show up. Justin Johnson, did an interview with him. He's starting to become known in the South and Southeast a little bit more. Got 4th place at Fittest to the Coast. Strong finish here. Trayvon, absent of the second to last events, the run in the row, was maybe the best guy there that weekend. He had a great performance in all the strength and gymnastics and capacity up to that point. And Jace Brooks, surprise of the weekend for me, didn't have him in the top 30, did get to do an interview with him, got to talk to a few people who are fans of his. It's auto mechanic as I remember it. Biggest hands I've ever shook in CrossFit, maybe other than Roman Krennikov, which I think is a huge advantage. He's strong enough. He had a top 5 finish on the last workout and won the run. If you're a guy who can win a run, especially after a row, and then also have the strength to back it up in the legless rope climb squat clean, that's a pretty good combination. So Jace Brooks, you're absolutely on my radar. It was fun talking to you and watching you compete, and congratulations on beating some pretty good athletes that are lining up there right behind you too.
Next group of athletes, we have Drake Lewis, Nikita, Kevin Shaw. I mean, out of this field. Anything you want to say about these guys?
I would just say Nikita Yundov and CJ Gerald literally lost the palms of their hand on Isabel, like all the way off, like some of the worst tears and bloodiest things I've ever seen. And they never complained about it. They just taped them up and went back to work. It reminded me of what Matt Rattay said when the interview I did with him. Like, these are tough SOBs. And they might not like it, but they're not going to let it be an excuse for them. I think it was just a good overall representation of the caliber of mentality and toughness that athletes up and down this leaderboard have to have at this point in this sport.
Let's talk about Ilya. Obviously, there's a lot put on him. He's a veteran in this competition. Matt Rattay knows him really well. Anything you want to say about Ilya?
I'm curious if Hiller's right, if he's the strongest guy that's also fit enough to be in these fields. I mean, he did lift extra weight on that last barbell, and he did it relatively seamlessly. Super nice guy. Did an interview with him, and his girlfriend helped translate a little bit. And you can look at his results, and they speak for themselves. A couple highs, couple lows. So I think still has some trajectory, but that level of strength is a good baseline that can with a couple more years of work, I think he can continue to climb competition leaderboards like this.
And speaking of Hiller, I would say like his day one, his recaps, really good. I really enjoyed watching those. I didn't get to watch too much of the competition because I didn't know what times they were coming out, where they'd be put out, but it was really cool. He did a good job with the behind the scenes and everything. Let's answer a couple more questions and then we'll kind of leave it here. Brian, I'm curious if you think that the games will be even broadcast this year, either on YouTube or cable.
Definitely, I think they will be broadcast on YouTube, cable. I hope so.
Yeah, we haven't heard anything. That's usually something they'll announce like maybe a month out, so we'll see. Lynn, do you know who tested these events, both male and female?
I don't know. I had heard a couple of women talking when I was leaving the venue after the sled push that seemed to be involved with the competition in some way, that were frustrated seemingly with the lack of testing. But that's the only thing that I had ever heard about it, so I don't really know. Well, I
Yeah,
mean, I guess we do know that Rich did something. I
yeah.
mean, because he did
But the
that
thing
thing.
is, like I said before, it's like
But testing
how,
a workout is that testing the
but
workout is
how
not just testing the workout.
well, it's not only that, but he might have tested them, but from when he tested them to when it showed up on the floor, how many iterations, how many things at times did that get altered? We
Yeah,
don't
and
know.
and especially think about the final. If you have Rich Froning do a legless rope climb, squat clean, ladder workout, is that a good benchmark for how the women in this competition field are going to do with it? So you need to have a little bit more well-rounded testing again, especially for the elite divisions. You got to try to seek out people who are comparable to what's going to be there, and then think about the intent. Just in general, having a final where nobody finishes is not a good final, regardless of what's on the scorecard in terms of the movements. So yeah, I would say opportunity for improved testing seems like it's likely. Isn't your show like 1 minute ago?
Yeah. So we got Herbert Jones. Who's this? Melvin Injinka. Oh, a Donovan Clean. Refractor. Gold. Green. That's worth a couple bucks. And then a Keontae George.
This is what
So,
Jeff thinks about your pack of can't even.
yeah.
Perfect.
Thanks everyone for coming in. Hopefully we got you a pretty decent recap. Like the whole point was to talk about the athletes and their performances. I believe we did that. Shout out to HCR CBD. Brian, what do you got to say?
In the box office, debuting tomorrow, Mesa and Kate will be there. I know that they've been drumming up the excitement for it. They're super passionate about this, so hopefully you guys can tune in and check them out and see what the new show that we have with those women is all about.
Yeah, and if you want to see me lose in a game show, head over to around. Switching over to around the whiteboard with. I'm going against Swanee and Seth Page, who was in there. So I'm going to head over there and see. We got some interesting topics, some pretty good topics we'll talk about. So head on over there and say hi while we're over there. So yeah, thanks
Yeah,
everyone.
harass PC in the comments. He never gets any. He never gets
I know
any.
I get no love. I'm just the guy that gets beat every time. But shout out to HCR CBD. Thanks for all the support. I was yeah, and kind of like what ironically Fitz said here. It's Wednesday. It's Hump Day. Got the rest of the week. Hey, be kind, and as always, be friendly.